Sometimes I open a sermon by saying, do you want the good news or the bad news? Well, do you want the good news or the bad news? The good news is, we are not our own. But when we, in Western society, for the last 300 years that is, we've had what we call the period of the Enlightenment, which is really about the most important focus of society was to set up a free, autonomous individual as the be-all and end-all of human life. And what does the gospel say? He says, this is a delusion. We belong to God. And God is right. The best thing of all, the good news is that we are made to be free from ourselves. When we truly and effectively belong to Christ, then Christ has the power to affect and control and direct all our thoughts and emotions and responses. And you only need to think about that and see it in the example of some of the saints to know that this release from the power of self is the best news that there could be. Now, if we try and think of what, if like, a modern prodigal son is, we can see it quite easily nowadays on the streets of our towns and cities. I remember when we were in Brighton that sometimes we were called out in the middle of the night or very late in the night in the early hours of the morning to go and pick up some hapless lady who was on the pavement in Brighton. And it was one of the most awful things one thing is a good thing to do, that we were there and prepared to do it, but to go out and see what had been happening on the streets of Brighton that night was awful, really. And it can be summed up really by saying that the aim of so many people when they're set free from their inhibitions, their families or whatever it may be, is that they go and the men seem to want to get as plastered as they can, or the ladies, I'm afraid, want to get plastered as much as they can, and the men make as much noise and as stupid fools of themselves in public and also do damage. When I first heard Father Sophrony and he speak to me, one of the most wonderful things I realized at that moment of revelation, that the good news is precisely that we don't have to do this stuff. We don't have to do this stuff because first of all, we make an absolute fool of ourselves. Absolute fool of ourselves. When I was a student, and that was, 50 years, I have to keep going back and saying, get it in date. I remember we did a rugby tour of Paris. And there was respectable policemen, respectable university administrators. If their wives and daughters and children could have seen what they got up to in Paris late at night, it was awful. It's absolutely awful. And we have to be honest as Christians. And instead of saying, oh yes, it's all very good, it's all there, my mates, and this, that, and the other, and we're all friends and all this other. In truth, it's actually awful. And what the people are doing are making an absolute fool for themselves. And we have to see this honestly and correctly. So here we are. We have prodigal son. He made a total fool of himself. He said, come on, Dad, off what? Can I have my money? Off we go. And he went off, and he spent it all on getting drink, on the women, and I suppose in the modern day you would include the drugs as well. And so he ends up in a place where he is having to feed amongst the smelly pigs. And he comes to his senses. He realizes, again in a revelation from God, that he has been an absolute fool. And the difficulty is, when people find themselves in that position, is them recognizing just what they are doing to themselves and to their bodies. I can't help thinking when the early bit of the epistle was about the things we do in our bodies. Again, you open the page of the paper, and there, I think it's the second page of the Times this was, so this is not some, the red tops. The second page, there's a picture of a celeb, famous young celeb from the northeast. And the point about putting a picture in the paper was because she decided that she had to have a tattoo, a big tattoo about like this, stretching from her bum and her midriff, which is all laid bare, with a tattoo. And I think, heavens, woman, what are you doing to yourself? She has enough money in the bank, millions in the bank, not to have to worry about anything. But the drug of being a celebrity is always to get yourself on another photograph in the paper. And so often it is just showing to everybody, actually, what a total fool you are. That body belongs to God. We belong to God. And it takes a long time to recognize this, but we have to do it. I think the truth is that we don't like being told what to do. It's no use telling these people what they should be doing and what they don't doing, because they will take not a blind bit of notice of you. That's simply a fact of experience. And the reality is, and we all know this, because I think we've all been fools in one way and another. Oh, I'm prepared to stand up and say that. We've all been fools in some way or another. That yes, we don't want to do what we're told to do, and if we're told to do something, the likelihood is that we go out and do exactly the opposite. And that's a very difficult climate in which to operate. And the only thing often one can do, and it often falls on poor mums and poor dads and so on and so on and so on, is as they see the children and what they start to do when they've got freedom from college and so in college and so on. And they desperately, young people, desperately need our prayers. Not only do they need our prayers, they need our desperate acceptance of where they are. I've been, one of the most moving things is to find young girls who have been out and done all the stuff with all their mates and so on, and they have to come home because there's nowhere else where they will actually be heard, listened to, and welcomed. And God can change lives around. But so often, the truth is human beings only learn the hard way. And they only learn the painful way. Because so often, again, we have to realize that everybody needs acceptance. And our youngsters need acceptance in the critical hours and moments of their life. They don't need to be told off. They don't need to be told what stupid fools they are. And this is the difficult bit for the fathers and mothers, or those who are in the position of being fathers and mothers. Because so often, the children have come home. In their desperation, they need help. And that is when we have got to button our lips and have the maximum forbearance to say, or if you need to say, I understand, or if you don't understand, to go on the painful path of starting to understand why people do things, why people make an absolute fool of themselves. So this is not just about the prodigal, the one who actually goes and is a fool of ourselves. It's also about having what I mentioned the other day, the father heart of God, when someone, and it can be anyone, you see, if you're in a position of being a father, and you've learned to father heart of God, it won't be simply your children. I haven't got any children. It could be other people's children. And, you know, yes, I'm sorry, but it just is so desperately moving to when the situation when the prodigal comes home, what is our response going to be? And we have to prepare ourselves for that, because maybe in our society today, when there's so much dissipation, there's so much foolishness going on, it is the Christians who are going to be sought out. It's going to be they who are going to come and want somebody to accept them, have mercy, and understand why they're doing what they're doing. And the mercy has to be the last word. It always has to be mercy and not judgment. We will often feel like saying all sorts of judgment, and that is not the way. The way is always the mercy and mercy, because ultimately what every human being needs is that fundamental acceptance. Acceptance that goes right through the heart into the depth of our soul. which is genuine and real. So think about the prodigal son. Think about maybe what foolish things we've done. We aren't perfect, and we don't pretend to be perfect. We don't hide necessarily what we've done, but at least we can come to start to understand what God intended for us, not only in soul but in body. He didn't intend us to do all these stupid things that we do in our bodies, because the answer is, in the end, my body and your body and our bodies belong to